Hello, Carl here, and welcome to my video on why you should always play Blackbeard in every single set. So, there's a lot of reasons to play Blackbeard. Some of them are set dependent, depending on the matchups, but a lot of them are much broader and are applicable to pretty much every set that we've seen and presumably will see. I've made a similar video that is more restricted on the OP13 meta, which is in more of a medicine commercial format, and I highly recommend watching that because it's quite entertaining. But with that all aside, I wanted to make a bit more of a serious or sincere video about it in case somebody is wondering whether or not they should play. So let's just get started. So we start with something simple. The deck is cheap. Blackbeard is one of the cheapest decks in the OPTCG, and even if you just order the full 51 cards of an example deck list, you probably will be paying less than 20 bucks. Um, if you have access to bulk, like at your local store, or people willing to trade you extras they have, you may have to pay 5 bucks, definitely less than 10. The investment you put into Teach is more one of just time and skill instead of having to use up your money as you might have to do if you were playing a meta deck where you may, for the new cards, for the expensive cards, for the rare things, the secret rares, you may very well have to pay more than 100 bucks. And some staples are dozens each, stuff like the yellow Kuma, the Cavendish or Bond. So like some things are less expensive now due to reprints, but a lot of those things get very expensive. If you really do want to spend money, there's cool alt arts for a lot of the Blackbeard cards. You can also just give me some. And yeah. Next up, the deck is off meta but strong. So when Teach first came out, it was meta for two sets, OP09 and OP10. And so it wasn't as cool to play it then or as unique because the meta slaves were playing it too. But since OP11, it has been a strong deck that can fight and beat the meta, but not be as popular or be part of the meta itself. It's has been and kind of always will be a good answer to multiple meta decks, just because at least some of the leaders of a set are going to be reliant on some powerful on plays or going to be susceptible to a stun from a 10 cost teach. Side decks that find resurgence often get crushed by those things. It'll probably be weak into some things, some aggro deck or some other things that may not be reliant on plays, but overall it's just going to be reliable, and it requires investment and time. It's a unique deck, and so meta slaves that bounce from deck to deck as new cards get released tend to stay away from it because it varies a bit in how it puts out, and that barrier to entry makes it an off meta pick. And so it's also underestimated due to the difficulty, right? The win rates, the numbers are lower than they could be, which can basically just be summarized to if you're looking for a deck to play that can fight against the meta competitively, but you aren't bouncing from deck to deck as a meta slave due to whatever power creep comes out next, Teach is your answer. Next up, negating the negation of your fun. So, many cards in the OPTCG are strong, and that always, somewhat needs to be the case, but some are actively frustrating beyond that acceptable strength. You can see some of the lovely cards I have in here. These may be things that get rid of your board, things that make things feel relatively hopeless. There's pudding, there's no real equivalent to that. But those cards can deny the fun of the game sometimes, and Blackbeard can prevent a lot of those cards. There are some that he can't, but just examples of ones I show are ones that Teach can stop and prevent, and that can just, lead to a better time. Leader ability alone prevents a lot of those cards, and of course, it prevents a lot of other things as well. You prevent draw and dawn value, slowing down a lot of tempo. It prevents a lot of stuns and removal, which tend to be on play. Some rush is on play, and healing is basically always on play. So you can dodge a lot of that. Black hole prevents immunity, or rather, it is able to kill things that are otherwise completely immune, and also able to get rid of things with strong on KO effects. Now, some other decks can do that too via bounces or bottom decking, something like preventing on KO effects, but Black Hole is just very good at doing it as well. Number 7, unique identity. So, many leaders are similar to one another, with an ever expanding cast of characters, a limited amount of colors, and a limited amount of things you can do. A lot of leaders end up close to one another, especially close to other leaders within their color. Some types of decks are more susceptible to this, like red aggro decks that try to swarm a bit, buff attacks, and then have a lot of rush. Yellow control decks that have healing and also have a bunch of triggers. Purple ramping into high drops, or purple deramping for tempo. All those things are relatively common, and generally when new leaders come out, for most of them, you're going to be able to have a pretty close comparison with other leaders, and they may have flavor differences that where you can say, okay, true, this is a different deck, but the core of the deck, the core of how it's played, has been seen before. So there are a few truly unique decks, and one of those is Teach. No one is like Teach. No one will be like Teach. The negation focus with the other aspects of it, the KO engine, the Burgess, the control aspect, there is just a combination of factors that make Teach unlike anything else. The on-play denial is the main aspect of that, and there is nothing like him. And there's if you like specifically those things, there's nothing else you can go to. It's also just something that you can be proud of playing. You can say, I'm a Teach player. I like playing Teach, and after you get into him a bit, that's just something you can feel proud of. No one is going around flexing that they're a Zoro player. Doesn't matter what Zoro deck. It's just not something you would be happy about most of the time. And I think with Blackbeard that's a bit different. He's relatively rare, but skill-based and unique, and so he just feels satisfying in that way and can be something you can dedicate yourself to. Yeah, he's also just a cool character. We're getting more and more of him later, so I think that'll only expand on the popularity of how fun it is to play him and how fun it is to be a Blackbeard player. Next up, a fun little simpler thing. Blackbeard is a very fun deck to end the game with. Due to the resilience and availability of Burgess, you're always going to be able to find him. You can keep bringing him back with Kuzan. He's immune to KOs and on plays prevents a lot of other removal. You're going to have Burgesses towards the late game on the board, and since you can play the 10 cost Teach to stabilize and also get a 12k blocker on the field, at the end you often have 3 or more characters with 12,000 attack just standing there. And you can then negate enemy blockers, whether you kill them or not, with Black Hole, which is searchable in many different ways, and thus remove blockers and then swing phase many times with those big swings. And so, from your opponent having a good amount of life and a good amount of cards in hand, suddenly their blockers are gone. You're swinging for 11k 4 times or more, using attached on leader, etc. And they just can't get out of it. Uh, they can try, a handful of 2Ks. They can try events that give them 4K and then add a 2K, and they still just can't get out of it because the amount of counter you need to get out of, 4 12k swings when you don't have blockers anymore is just ridiculous. So they can see you, you know, grab black hole, they can see you prepare for lethal, and there's not really much they can do. They can just wait for their death. The double attack Devon helps with that sometimes if you really need to do a lot of damage at once. And the upcoming promo Teach will further amplify it when you're able to set it up and then negate all blockers and leader abilities without using any Dawn that turn. That's going to be incredibly sexy. And whenever you're able to put that on the field without dying right away, it's gonna be GG the following turn. So I think it's just a very fun way to end the game. Those brutal many big hits, and it's a good reason to play Teach. We're now in the top 5, and we're gonna start here with the fact that nothing is doomed. So in the OPTCG, depending on the deck you're playing and depending on what you're up against and whether you win or lose the coin toss, it can feel very hopeless. You can get into a matchup and be like, I might as well, I barely even need to play. This matchup is 70-30 anyways, and now I lost the coin toss, and now it's 90-10. Unless my opponent is extremely stupid or completely bricks, I'm just screwed. Um, and Teach just doesn't have that for a lot of things. The amount of strength you can pull out of a hand vary significantly. And so a good Teach player can gain so much more power than a weaker Teach player, which is already just adds a great amount of range, but Teach punishes misplays and weaknesses extremely hard. Especially if you're able to read your enemy well and what they're planning, if you can try and predict what on plays they have, if you can predict what they're going for. Playing against Teach can be an absolute minefield. And even if your opponent is in an advantageous position, based on the matchup, based on the turn order, based on the cards that you each had, it is incredibly easy to make mistakes. And you, as a Teach player, are able to capitalize on that incredibly well and win games that other decks just wouldn't have been able to pull back. There are basically answers in the Blackbeard deck to every type of card. The question just being how well you can set them up and use them, right? Of course, some games end up being lost and not everything is winnable. But in general, when you sit down for a game, by, by the point where the game starts, nothing is decided yet. And I think some people will, can definitely be frustrated playing other decks when they feel like the game is over before it's even started. You have Burgess and Teach later for control. You can suddenly go for game if you feel like you're gonna die afterwards anyways. Early on, you have a lot of defense and removal if you're playing the KO engine. And since all decks are slowed down that you're playing against, it reduces the range of the win rate quite a bit. And I would say that there's almost no decks that have, where you have a lower than 45% win rate. Even the roughest things like Emo recently was very tough, um, is not below 45%. There's specifically Sanji. For some reason, both Sanji decks are incredibly rough for us to play. But that aside, anything that comes up, Teach has a good chance of handling with it, especially if you play better than your opponent. Number 4, unique effects. So Blackbeard has a lot of effects, multiple that no other deck has. Uh, Obviously, the leader ability is the first thing that comes up. It negates on plays and significantly slows down enemy decks. It denies core cards and combos of many decks that you're playing against and significantly cripples how they are able to play at all. And there's no other thing that exists like this. Um, yeah, it's just there's no equivalent, and there will not be one. Black hole is a second one. It negates the effect and then KOs a forecast. The negation always applies. There's no condition to this. And so It is the only card in the game that can kill and remove targets with full immunity. Stuff like all the Elders and Emu, a lot of cards in OP14 that are coming out um, have such immunity or practical immunity where you can, for a minor cost, prevent them or other cards from getting killed. Black Hole gets around that. You can also just deny an ability even without killing it if you just need it off for that turn. It's also a lot of powerful on KO effects that Black Hole is able to get around. If they're forecast, like something like the Kikunoju that gets you a life, or Basil Hawkins that trashes a life, or other things that revive, Black Hole can prevent those like some other blue cards, for example, can. But the immunity, only Black Hole is able to get around. Next up, the third one is the 10 cost Teach. It can turn off an enemy leader ability that is useless against a lot of decks and incredibly powerful against other decks. Um, Things like the Green Bonnie, things like no Sabo, Yellow Enel, Red Green Luffy. Leaders that have abilities there get absolutely destroyed by the 10 cost Teach in this aspect, and it's also able to negate the ability of a character on board. So there are cards that can stun a character from attacking or keep them rested, for example, but there is nothing else that can stun a character during the opponent turn like this uh, in the way of negating an effect. Also turns off things like blocker, so it's just incredible in that sense, strong and unique. The new boa is also a good example of a leader that where the negation is just incredibly useful. Um, Lastly, not fully unique in its way, but there is no character that comes close to Burgess's attack. No low cost character. There have been attempts. There's like the Sanji that ramps with events, but nobody ramps at the speed that Burgess does, and Teach is also incredibly good at getting multiple Burgesses onto the board efficiently, such as the 5-cost Kuzan, where you're able to, draw. You can play them without worry, and the deck is also incredibly good at just getting a whole bunch of cards into the trash. And so you get to 11k, 12k, 13k attack 4 costs, numbers that usually only 9 and 10 costs are able to reach. And Teach can do that just kind of as a side thing. We are in the top 3. We get to a little sadism, a little Schadenfreude. Teach is a deck that is based on negation after all, and so many decks have cards that they build towards high cost things, or they have structures that they rely upon for their general game strategy. And a lot of these, or the steps to them, we can negate. Um, Knowing how much your opponent builds towards or usually relies on a card or setup, and then just being able to stun, deny, or negate it is just fun. It's satisfying. Sometimes there's the, personal, more sadistic joy of, you know, you see that the other person is frustrated, that you just turned off their leader ability, that you just negated their blocker, that their on plays are negated, and you see that they have a bunch of 10 cost bricks in hand. And other times it's just knowing in theory that these things are happening and that you're destroying the deck instead of the person, right? This can be stuff like your yellow opponent not healing, your purple opponent not getting to ramp, your blue opponent not drawing 5 cards every turn, all those things that you just know they really want to be doing now, but just can't. They have 10 costs that they would otherwise, hope to have in their hand just as bricks. Not worth playing because they don't have another effect and would get stunned by 10 cost anyways, things that are now too slow. It's just fun. There's a lot of core removal that decks rely on that's just not usable against your board because uh, the Burgess is immune, the Kuzan is immune, their on plays are turned off. The 10 cost Teach is too high cost to, affect with a lot of other things. It's just beautiful. Vortex can deny multi-attacks, it can prevent rush, and things like Roger even. So there's just that aspect of Schadenfreude when playing the deck, and just knowing how much you're screwing over some of the decks. There's also the nice part of enemies missing core cards. There are cards that are very powerful against you as well, but your opponent may just not find enough of them because either from the very start or after a bit you turn off searchers and they can't have that moment where later on they just play two searchers real quick to find something. And so they're missing those cards that would otherwise be enough to beat you, like a emo player only being able to find four of the elders or just not having enough of the 10 costs. A green purple Luffy that just doesn't find a or at least not more than one pudding and doesn't find the dead man's games. And winning in that way is also just satisfying. We get to the top two, and the first one here is Immortal. And what I mean by that is Blackbeard is a deck that is borderline impossible to completely kill from the meta. A lot of decks shift in and out, but Blackbeard just does not. Um, Strong decks we've seen, cards that came out recently in OP11 or so, where we thought this is insane power creep, this is ridiculous, this is broken, ends up just disappearing relatively quickly. So Rayleigh, blue purple Luffy, even the green Zoro seems to be now just gone in OP14. We'll see how well Ace and Emu last into the 15, but even those strong things just fade out. But Teach is able to stay strong consistently through all those 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Teach just stays there. And the first reason for that is that Teach focuses on negation effects and removal if you're playing the engine. And so as the enemy cards get stronger, the negation of them gets stronger. The easiest example of that, of course, is on-play abilities. You see a new ridiculous card, some new on-play that does 2 damage or heals or gets insane value for, way too much cost, and then you just remember, oh right, I play Teach. I don't care. It's a brick. Um, and there's just many cards like that. I would say at least half of all the insanely powerful cards that come out are due to on-play effects, and Teach just doesn't have to deal with those. So any new cards that come out that are strong, that have some effect, whether it's by on-play or something you can deal with by stunning with the 10 cost, are Blackbeard buffs in a way. Because those decks being played, those cards being played, translate to Teach getting easy wins against enemies that have, vanilla cards that have no effects with bricks in hand. And so even without Blackbeard getting direct new cards, he just continues to get stronger non-stop. It's also the case that some meta decks will always be losing to Teach. There will just always be some things that come out that are just reliant on plays to some degree, or that just run right into a removal engine or can't deal with Burgess 10 cost Teach later. And there's also a lot of side decks that just get crushed by Teach. Things that are maybe reliant on healing or ramp. Teach does very well against those. And one core part of why he's so hard to kill, aside from the, scaling with power creep, is that Teach has 2 different decks. There is the KO engine version, and there's the Burgess and Blockers version. The KO engine version includes stuff like the Dock and Augur and 7 cost Teach and Tempest Kick, and focuses on removing what your opponent plays as it comes onto the board, and the Burgess, which focuses on getting the Burgess big as quickly as possible and protecting yourself and it with blockers, right? And those deck lists can look extremely different and play extremely different and are flexible based on the meta. And what that means is that to truly kill Teach in the meta needs to kill both decks. That's extremely unlikely and difficult because they cover each other's weaknesses a lot of the time, right? The engine may be having a tough time because there's too many things that are difficult to KO, and Burgess just ignores that. Maybe there's, a lot of decks that can deal with the Burgess well, but it's unlikely that they can also be safe from all the removal that the engine brings with it. And so, for example, in OP11, blue purple basically killed Burgess Heavy Focus because of its strong removal in the form of the Rush Luffy that bounced the forecast. And so you could just not play Burgess into it and you would just lose. But the engine was actually favored into blue purple because the auger is out of range and we could set up an engine that would completely kill the 9 cost he played and just deny his setup. In OP13, Emo did the opposite, being completely immune to the normal removal, which kills the engine, but the Burgess is actually fine. The Ace is also too high 10 costs to kill with the engine, but Burgess has enough attack to just beat through. And so Teach kind of weaves in and out to dodge the meta and is able to kind of handcraft the right variant that can deal with what's going on now. And so him truly just dying is very, very unlikely. Here, I throw in a little honorable mention. There's me. Uh, if you choose to play Blackbeard and main Teach, there's amazing guides for that leader from an amazing person that I can highly recommend. They're just, free, easily available, in depth on YouTube. So, you know, just nice in that manner. We have a welcoming community, a nice Discord server where you can get all your questions answered and just have a good time and get better at the leader. He's just an amazing dude overall as well, the guy who makes these guides, so I hear. And coaching is also available with the money that you aren't spending on, 4, 6 cost yellow Kumas. So yeah, but let's continue on. And we get to the number one reason the deck is incredibly skill based. So Teach is a very complex deck with not only a high skill floor, but a very high skill ceiling. Fully mastering Teach is incredibly difficult, if not just fully impossible. Um, it is arguably the most difficult deck in the game because it requires you to not only know your deck, but also every single enemy deck that you're going to be up against. So it just requires a lot of memorization and practice in that sense, and just an understanding of the general game as well. You can always get better as a Teach player. Even once you really know what you're doing and have a lot of success, you just notice while you're playing, when you're losing, and even when you're winning, that you're not quite where you could be. And as a result, there's less of a mentality of that there was nothing you could do in a certain game. This, of course, always varies a bit player to player. Some people will be more likely to blame all their failures on bad luck or broken cards. But Teach actively incentivizes you to notice that you could have actually won that game, and you didn't because you misplayed. And that, of course, is frustrating in its own way, but it leaves you feeling less hopeless and less doomed, and it leaves you thinking, damn, I could have won that. And then as a next step, next time I will, right? And if you do, that is a very, very satisfying feeling. Mm, how to ideally play Teach constantly changes from set to set based on not only the matchup, but what those decks also tend to build, right? You always need to be aware of those things and playing around them while correctly trying to guess what your opponent has in hand, knowing what they could have, and then based on how they play or what they don't play, what they may or may not have, and dodging around that, weighing the pros and cons, weighing the value of losing a card with your leader ability to deny a potential tempo or a potential card, figuring out what cards you need to keep in hand and what cards you can afford to or even want to trash as soon as possible. It is a knife's edge with the card draw you're often lacking and the small hand size that you may need to defend as a control deck. How much you can commit to going in, whether you play a Burgess focus or an engine focus. There's so much to consider, and there's just so much that you need to know and think about. As a result of the game being able to go in so many different directions and so many things being necessary to winning, wins can be very satisfying. You know that you won because you played well and not just because you won the coin toss or had the right matchup or hit the right things. You pretty commonly know that not everybody would have won this game even if they were given the same cards, right? And that's just very satisfying and it makes wins feel better. Uh, so not just the losses feel less frustrating, but the wins are more, you know, fulfilling as well. And as a result of it, the a good teach player is a good One Piece player. Since you need to know all your opponent's decks, obviously if you were given one of them, you would also know what it does and how you should probably play it, even with a bit of a Blackbeard, tilted lens on it. And you need the fundamentals of the TCG with the balance that Teach has of how much you go into swinging, how much you go into removal, when you go into game, balancing card draw. All these things mean that a good Teach player will be able to get pretty good at most decks pretty quickly. And while this does make Teach a difficult deck to pick up as your first deck, it is definitely something you can work towards. And due to this high ceiling, due to always knowing that you could be a bit better, due to knowing that you won because you played it well and the satisfaction that comes with it, it's very difficult to get bored of Teach. Um, as you keep improving, as you win games that you know previously I wouldn't have won this, and now I do, means you can keep playing Teach for a long time. What it means to play Teach keeps developing as new cards come out. So the deck becomes, more fun in that way. New matchups can change how things get played a lot, and it means that when a new set comes out, you're not necessarily, bored of your current deck and thinking, oh, I'm looking forward to playing the new decks. You're thinking, oh, I'm looking forward to playing against the new decks. Because that can be just as exciting because it just is such a different thing when you're playing Teach. So, in conclusion, the deck is incredibly cheap. It is off meta while still being strong. You can stop a lot of enemy cards that would otherwise make the game less fun for you. The game has a unique identity that allows you to identify it with it and have fun. It is fun to finish with the deck due to the high swings and black hole. No game is ever truly doomed right from the beginning. It has a lot of unique effects that no other deck can at all or equally replicate. There is a good amount of Schadenfreude sometimes as you deny enemy decks. The deck is practically immortal as fully kicking out of the meta is incredibly difficult. And most importantly, it's an incredibly skill-based deck that allows you to spend a lot of time improving and mastering the deck and is satisfying as a result. So, if you want a deck to commit to that is strong, fun, and unique, then Blackbeard is your number one choice. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're now considering playing Teach if you weren't already. Join the channel, join the Discord, and come to the dark side. We have cherry pie.